Go get your own oil. Another angry outburst from Donald Trump against the UK. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch tells Sky News that only our enemies want to see a war of words between Britain and America.
The only people who benefit or who want to see a degradation in the Western alliance are countries like Iran and Russia.
And all this just hours before the palace announced that the king will be going ahead with a state visit to Washington in April. Also ahead, a summer of discontent looms for the NHS. More doctors are to vote on industrial action over pay. No deal with the French either. Paris says not to the Home Secretary's demand for targets on Channel migrants. And no books, but a replica of Air Force One and a gold statue of Donald Trump. Is this really a library? We hope to leave you better read and more informed with Michelle Donnellan and Joe Grady, who'll be with me for the next hour. I'm Ali Fortescue, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Politics Hub. Tonight, a fresh message to the UK from Donald Trump. You'll have to start learning how to fight for yourself. He added that America won't be there to help you anymore, just like you weren't there for us. It is the latest jibe from the US president, who's made no secret of his unhappiness at the UK's response to the war, and he is now suggesting that he could abandon plans to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and leave others to deal with the consequences. Well, a lot going on today, and Buckingham Palace has also confirmed that the King's state visit to the United States will go ahead in late April. He will travel to Washington with transatlantic relations at their most fractious since the Suez Crisis in 1956. Nonetheless, the White House is rolling out the red carpet and promising a banquet fit for a king. The president has said on social media this momentous occasion will be even more special this year as we commemorate the 250th anniversary of our great country. I look forward to spending time with the King, whom I greatly respect. It will be terrific. Well, David Blevins is in Washington for us. So it seems Donald Trump prefers the King to the Prime Minister.
Yeah, fascinating, really, that the man who has on more than one occasion described Keir Starmer as no Winston Churchill is expressing great respect for the British monarch, but no respect, it would seem, for the United Kingdom. Just moments before that post on Truth Social confirming that they were welcoming the King to the United States, Donald Trump posted quite a criticism of the UK, singling it out, urging it to find some courage and suggesting perhaps that it should go and get its oil elsewhere. Now, within an hour of that, the palace announced that the King and Queen were going to go ahead with their state visit. So the timing was awkward, to say the least. And it wasn't the only swipe at the UK today. Moments after the statement had been delivered by the palace, the president's self-styled Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, called on other countries to step up and help with the Strait of Hormuz. He said, the last time I heard, there's supposed to be a big, bad Royal Navy. Now, that is the same Royal Navy, of course, of which King Charles is Commander-in-Chief and in which he served as an officer. I suppose the war in Iran, the friction between the United States and the UK has added an extra diplomatic significance to this state visit, but it was always going to be hugely symbolic, marking the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, I suppose you could say, from King George III to King Charles III, his great-grandson 5 times over. It's always been a tricky relationship.
OK, David, thanks very much for us with the US perspective there. Well, let's go straight to the UK perspective with Alex Rogers, our political correspondent. Alex, I mean, you know, we know relations are at a low ebb between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump, but this is soft power in action, I guess.
I think some in government will be relieved that this is happening as a kind of move to ease some of the tensions that we've really seen since the start of the Iran war. But not everyone's happy. The Liberal Democrats have called it a humiliation, saying that the visit shows is treating the UK with contempt. But one politician who was happy was John Healey, the Defence Secretary, who's been speaking in the Middle East. Here's what he had to say.
The King is a unique leader, a unique diplomat, and a great asset for Britain. I'm not going to comment on President Trump's tweets or his statements. That's not my job.
So John Healey is also trying to sort of stay out of the commentary that Donald Trump is giving, but also on that visit he did announce that more troops would be sent to the Middle East and more air defence systems. So I think that's the government trying to get back on the front foot after we've had more insults from Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth about the state of our military.
Yeah, and potentially more to come. Alex Rogers, thank you very much. Well, a little earlier, I did speak to the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, and I began by asking her about the current state of the special relationship. Thanks so much for talking to us. We've just found out that the King, at the end of next month to the US on this state visit. Do you think that's going to bring our countries closer? Is that a good thing?
Well, the relationship has always been between the United Kingdom and the United States, not between whoever happens to be president or prime minister. And I think it is important that on the 250th anniversary of American independence that the King is there. After all, it was independence from King George at the time. So there's something very historic about that. 250th anniversaries don't come round every year. So we need to make sure that when there is a historic moment to celebrate, that we're represented, and I'm really pleased that the King is going.
Do you think we should be standing up to Donald Trump more? I mean, that seems to be what many of the public think.
Well, I think that we need to do what is right in the British national interest. If Donald Trump says something that is against British national interests or is rude about our country, I think we should absolutely push back on that. I don't think we should have a war of words. It's very important that between countries where there are difficulties...
Well, it's quite hard to avoid when he's...
behind the scenes. Well, he shouldn't be doing that, is my point.
Donald Trump?
Well, yes, there's no point doing that, because the only people who benefit or who want to see a degradation in the Western alliance are countries like Iran and Russia. When I was Trade Secretary, even when I was very angry with what other countries were doing, I did that on the phone.
That's what Keir Starmer's doing. Yeah, so it sounds like you're pro what Keir Starmer's doing, not Donald Trump.
Well, I don't know what Keir Starmer's doing. No, none of us knows. That's the way it should be done. If Donald Trump says something that I agree with, then I'll say yes, he's correct. Like drilling our own oil and gas in the North Sea. He said that to me when I met him at the state visit, which Keir Starmer requested from him. We all remember when he gave that invitation. I think that's absolutely right. We need to look after British national interests.
OK, on that drilling in the North Sea, you've talked a lot about that. Can you just be really specific in how it helps with the price? Because I'm trying to get my head around this.
It's about lowering bills. If you drill oil and gas in the North Sea, you get billions of pounds in revenue.
But the prices are set globally.
Which you can use from the taxes, because you
so
tax
it's a tax
this,
take.
Yes, and then your tax take increases. You get billions of pounds, which you can then use to lower bills. Because right now,
but hold on, sorry, you want to get rid of the windfall tax on the North Sea. So isn't that going to impact? Yeah, that's going to mean there's less tax take.
Because the windfall tax taxes investment. There was one company I spoke to who said that they're taxed 104% of their profits. This is not about creating extra taxes. If you drill that oil, it gets taxed naturally, and then you get billions that way. It's not about increasing the taxes on the oil to 100% to the point where people don't bother drilling it. Just let the activity happen. We're losing 1,000 jobs a day in oil and gas. Where are all those people going?
So it's about jobs.
It's about everything. It's about financial security. It's about economic security.
But, you know, this is not going to change bills immediately.
Of course it can, because they can also, our cheap power plan is about scrapping VAT on bills today. That's one of the things that I announced yesterday. You can take the VAT off those bills. You can also scrap the green taxes and levies today. That's something that the government can do. I wrote to Keir Starmer and I said, this is what you should do. We could take £200 off household bills, and businesses would benefit as well.
You've been talking a lot about, you know, your plans to cancel some of the green levies. Is that going to mean cancelling? Ultimately, it will certainly have an impact on renewable projects.
I don't think so. In fact, what we're seeing is that there's some wind farms that are getting 3 times the price of electricity. The subsidy mechanism...
But, you know, most of that money does go on funding large-scale renewable projects.
So, as I was saying, the subsidy mechanism, which Ed Miliband has put in place, is not fit for purpose anymore. Why should energy companies be getting 3 times the price of energy, of electricity, when households and businesses can't afford to pay those bills? We can find another way to do this. If you really want to subsidise, I don't think...
What is the other way?
drill oil and gas in the North Sea and use the money from that.
You're using that money for an awful lot.
Yeah, but it depends on how much you drill. Well, the one thing you're not getting by ending the drilling is any money. You're getting zero. That doesn't work. Everybody is saying this needs to happen. Even Tony Blair's saying it. Renewable UK, Centrica. I was speaking to apprentices and they're saying that their friends are going abroad. They're getting jobs in the Middle East. They're going to Norway. They're working on Dutch projects. What are we doing sitting on our hands? It doesn't work.
You've been quite critical of their plans for targeted support. Does that mean if you were to offer support, it wouldn't be targeted?
The cheap power plan which we have, scrapping the green levies and VAT off bills, VAT for 3 years off bills, that helps everybody, every household. Everyone is struggling. Businesses are struggling. I've just
so we're talking about blanket support, basically.
It is removing levies, removing taxes is very different from taking taxpayer money to give to people. That's what the government wants to do. More taxpayer money for people on welfare. I think that is wrong.
Well, they haven't actually said it's for people on welfare, have they?
Said it, well, they pretty much have.
They've said it would be means tested.
Only the most vulnerable.
In principle, do you believe that support should be means tested?
Well, I believe that support comes from taxpayers. It's not money in Keir Starmer's pocket. It is the money of your viewers. He's taking that money to give to people who are on benefits, just like they did with the budget. What I'm saying is, why don't you just take the taxes off people's bills instead? That's a lot easier.
OK. If you don't mind, I did want to ask you a couple more general questions, because it's not that often we get, 10 minutes to sit down with you. And a lot of people say that you've found your feet recently, you seem much more relaxed, you're doing much more of these interviews. What's changed? Why is that?
Well, I think anyone who's ever done a job knows that it gets easier the longer that you do it. What was really interesting was how people wanted a miracle overnight after 14 years of Conservative government and a historic defeat. It was always going to take time. We have a long-term strategy. I've got a long-term strategy. There are going to be bumps along the way. It's not all going to be perfect.
But was it tricky at the start? You're a straight talker. What has changed?
Well, I think one of the things that's changed is that it's easier to know what it is that I'm opposing. When you have a new government, it's actually quite hard to work out what it is they're trying to do. It is now very clear what we have.
So they've got worse, not you've got better?
Well, it's clear what they are. They're a party that's just about welfare. They're the welfare party, not the Labour Party. And with time, people are seeing that the Conservative Party is changing.
I think a lot of people in the polling suggest this too, feel like they don't really know you. So I guess I want to try to understand, Kemi the person. You told Sophie Ridge, I don't think about wanting to be Prime Minister. Has that changed?
I'm an engineer. I think about solving problems. How do we fix this? How do we get this to work? As a politician, being Prime Minister is the way that I can be in a position to actually bring those solutions into reality.
So you want to be Prime Minister?
So of course, but for a purpose. I don't want to be Prime Minister to just grandstand. I want to be Prime Minister so that I can help people. A lot of people treat being Prime Minister like an award at the end of an awards show, or a way of getting on TV, or being king without being born into the royal family. I think being Prime Minister is about public service. It's about how do you make people's lives better. And it's about taking tough decisions. A lot of people want to do easy things, which come in and be liked. I want to come in and actually fix things and make people's lives better.
And lastly, I want to ask about a comment that got quite a lot of traction. You talked about being the tattletale in the classroom. Do you think that was a characterisation that put some people off?
No, I don't think so. I've been very clear. If I see something or someone doing something wrong, I will say so. And I don't care if people don't like that. I think a lot of the stuff that's gone wrong in our country is people seeing bad things happening and looking away or being too scared to say that's wrong.
But do you get why that puts some people off? They wouldn't necessarily want the person that was snitching on them in the classroom. That's not that likeable a quality, I guess.
Honestly, I don't mind if people don't like that. I hate cheating and I hate cheats. And if people cheat, then I will come after them. And that's not something that I'm ever going to shy away from. If you want people who will look away when they see cheating, whether it's cheating on benefits or cheating the taxpayer out of stuff, there are loads of other parties that will help that happen. If you want someone who's going to say no and doesn't care about the abuse that she gets for doing the right thing, then come to me. I'm not afraid of doing the right thing.
So are there any other characteristics from your school days that are maybe a bit warmer that people might like?
Well, I think that people can see that I'm somebody who loves to have fun, who likes, a good joke. But right now, what really worries me is what's going on in the country. I think people want to know what kind of person I am today. A mother of 3 children who's very worried about the future her children are going to inherit, rather than what I may have been like when I was at school. Look at the person that I am now and what it is I'm saying.
OK, let's bring our panel in for this evening, shall we? Joe Grady, General Secretary of the University and College Union, and former Science Secretary and Culture Secretary of State, Michelle Donovan. Thank you both. Right, so much to talk about, and we'll come on to Kemi Badenoch. But first, we've seen more criticism from Donald Trump. Michelle, do you think that all this matters, or is it just words?
In terms of the rhetoric that he's using, I think it matters because look where we are. And now we're hearing talks about a global recession. We know that the cost of oil is skyrocketing, that is going to put enormous pressure on people's energy bills later this year. But also, if farmers are facing pressure now because of the cost of fertiliser, that's going to feed into the cost of food, and that's only just gaining traction in the debate. And all this comes when we've already got a high cost of living here in the UK, and people are really going to struggle. So it matters. Because if this war continues and this narrative continues, then it's going to actually cost people and hurt them in their pockets and their ability to look after their own families.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, isn't it, Joe? Do you think the government is being clear enough in their messaging when they sort of say keep calm and carry on? That's their public messaging at the moment.
I mean, I think you have to do the right thing. And at this moment in time, the right thing is being very clear with Donald Trump that we're not going to get dragged into a potentially illegal but misguided war. This is not a special relationship for the British people. Donald Trump is doing absolutely nothing for working people. When we look at this war in Iran, the very first day of that war, we saw over 100 innocent children slaughtered. His partner in crime in this war is literally someone who is wanted for war crimes, Benjamin Netanyahu. I think it is to Keir Starmer's credit that we haven't got more involved. I would like to see him go further and ensure that we are not participating in any way, because this is a disaster.
Michelle, do you fear that Donald Trump doesn't know what he was doing? That was certainly the sense from William Hague in the Times today.
Yeah, I think that it is becoming apparent that he's lost control of the situation, and what he expected was going to happen isn't unfolding. And we can see that clearly from the talk of potentially ending this war with the Strait of Hormuz not being sorted out or resolved. And there is a sense that, well, it's okay for America, and in his comments on Truth Social today, where he said, one of the options is to come and buy oil from the United States. Well, hang on a minute. This situation has begun at the hands of America, and they need to continue to seek to resolve it. But one solution is not for us to just go and buy oil at a very, very high price, because that's not going to solve anything. It's still going to bake in those costs. And then the other option, he said, was just go and get it. Well, it's not quite as simple as that either, really, is it?
We know there's going to be a state visit next month. Do you think that should go ahead, Joe?
I have to say it feels like an early April Fool's joke. The King, Charles, has done all he can recently to distance himself from his brother. And he is now going to visit Donald Trump in America, a man who is notoriously mentioned a good number of times in the Epstein files. I think if the royal family want any credibility with the British public, this is a really, really misguided visit, and I think it's a bit of a disaster.
What's your take on this,
I
Michelle?
have a very different view here. I think that there is a special relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States. It is very strained, to put it mildly, at the moment, but it's bigger than one person and one president. We have to remember that. And I think it would be a grave mistake to turn our back and to act in the way that Donald Trump is. Some of his rhetoric at the moment is very petulant. It sounds like somebody in the playground. It also sounds like they're trying to hold the rest of the global economy to ransom. The answer is not to just ignore them or to block them. The answer is to remain in dialogue. And one of our massive benefits and assets to diplomacy is the King. So I think we should certainly be maintaining that visit.
So you want to come in, Joe?
Yeah, I just think at this moment in time, like, Donald Trump is the America show. Like, there isn't a kind of America beyond him. He goes on social media and talks in all caps. He develops foreign policy on the hoof. There is the looming legacy of not enough Epstein files being released and what this means.
So what do you think the King and the Prime Minister should do then, in terms of standing up to him?
Well, I think that we could go as far as Spain. The Prime Minister of Spain has been very critical, have been clear that the resources of Spain is not going to be used. I think that Donald Trump is a man with paper-thin skin, and our king talks a lot about wanting to look after the environment, of commitments to climate change. We have in Donald Trump a world leader that is really trampling over everything, and I think it would be a much stronger message from the palace and a much stronger message from Number 10 for them to actually say, we're not happy with this, and to hold them account.
OK, thank you both. We'll come back to you. We just want to bring you some news. Sky News understands that the King will not be meeting with Epstein survivors during that trip to Washington. So that's news just into us at Sky News. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, the NHS faces more strikes. Well, the BMA has announced that senior doctors in England are to be balloted on industrial action in a dispute about pay. The union described proposals for a 3.5% increase as a crushing blow. And I should say this is a separate dispute from the one involving junior or resident doctors who will walk out for 6 days in April. Well, a little earlier, I spoke to the Labour MP and former doctor, Peter Princely. Do you think the government needs to accept at least some responsibility for these strikes?
Well, look, I think the whole thing is a bit of a give and a take, isn't it? There's been a negotiation which has been now going on. I do think that the two sides have been negotiating in good faith. And I'm just very sad that we're at the state we're at right now. I mean, I was a doctor for 40 years before I was an MP, and I never got involved in strikes. So the idea that there are doctors' strikes just sort of seems so incredible to most people. But sadly, this is the situation we're in.
And what do you think the government should be doing right now? You know, what do they have a plan?
Well, I think that sadly, I think it's likely that the strike that is planned for after Easter may well go ahead. But I think there's a couple more days of negotiation. I believe that the deadline to call the thing off would be Thursday. And I believe that the doctors' negotiators and the government negotiators are, still having detailed conversations about what could be done to try and solve this. I mean, I think the government, to be fair, has come up with a whole lot of things which will improve the lives of the doctors. One thing I was particularly pleased about was this medical prioritisation bill, which meant that doctors who, have come out of British medical schools have a much greater chance of getting into British training programmes. This was a bill that was passed a few weeks ago, and I think that's an excellent thing. I think the government
hasn't been enough. Sorry to interrupt. I just know we have limited time. But it hasn't been enough to stop them striking. You know, do you think
No.
it's the big pitch from Keir Starmer when he became Prime Minister that he would get around the negotiating table, do what the Conservatives didn't manage to? But, you know, it is proving harder, perhaps, than they expected.
Certainly is. I mean, there was a very substantial pay deal in the first year that the government came in, and that dealt with the strikes. But, you know, we're back into the situation now that we were before. I honestly think that there is a deal to be done. I think that if we can continue talking to the doctors, if the government doesn't lose heart and just keeps going, I do think that something will be settled, because we simply can't go on and on like this.
And what is if it doesn't get settled, what's your message to patients? Because, you know, at some point this does become a public health risk. You know, do you think we will see appointments, operations being cancelled?
Well, look, the first thing to say is that the hospitals will continue working. And if people are ill or need to seek medical attention, they must do so. There shouldn't be any reluctance to do that. And, you know, I think that in the last few strikes now, the hospitals have had a sort of workaround. And I believe up to about 90 or 95% of all the activity has, in fact, continued. But, you know, inevitably, if the thing keeps going on like this, there will be an impact on patient care, particularly, you know, for people who need follow-up appointments and the sort of non-urgent things that people have been waiting to have done. I mean, we have been very successful in getting these waiting lists down, but if we keep having strokes, that's going to be more difficult to keep getting the waiting lists down. But I suppose the main message is that if you're ill or you need to get medical advice, don't be reluctant to seek it during the strikes, because the hospitals will be working.
OK, let's bring our duo back in, shall we, Joe and Michelle. Joe, what do you think the government should be doing here on these strikes?
Look, whether you are a doctor, a bin worker, a teacher, a nurse, no worker votes to take strike action and then takes it easily. It is a big decision that workers take to withdraw their labour, and I think particularly, you know, for medical professionals. What I've seen today from Keir Starmer, and I think we saw it a bit from Wes Streeting around the resident doctor strikes, was sort of macho language, you know, telling medical professionals what to do and kind of trying to instruct the union. And I don't think that's wise. I don't think that kind of macho language is helpful. I think, you know, the doctors are saying we need change, and I think they need listening to, rather than, you know, us being allowed to kind of end up with a ballot that could end up with action.
I mean, the Conservatives saw firsthand how difficult this was, and I guess, you know, Labour came in saying that they were going to deal with strikes, but it's difficult.
It is difficult, but they did sort of wax lyrical about how they'd reset the relationship and the grown-ups were in the room and everything was going to change. And remember, the black hole that allegedly was left, a huge part of that was created because of the payout to the NHS and staff. And look, first of all, our doctors do an incredible job, and I believe that it is a profession that should be adequately resourced and paid for, and that the conditions that they're working in are sometimes extremely hard, and the level of responsibility on their shoulders is massive. So nobody is disputing that. However, any kind of pay rise has to come from somewhere, doesn't it? And we were just talking a moment ago about the challenges that this country is facing, the potential for a global recession, the cost of living that is skyrocketing, the fact that people will soon face energy bills and food bills that they won't be able to afford. So any additional pay rises on top of what's already been offered have to come from somewhere. And my question would be, where is that going to come from then?
I mean, is that the key point there?
I mean, it is a key point. I think, you know, Labour did inherit a mess from the Tories, and I think that is something that needs to be acknowledged. We, as a trade union movement, and our union in particular, have been saying to Labour, you know, in order to address the mess that the country was left in, you are going to have to do more things like a wealth tax. You know, we have extremely wealthy people in this country that do not pay their fair share. And we have, you know, I cannot imagine the pressure doctors are under day in, day out. And they would not be taking this step lightly.
Thank you both. We will come back to you, I promise. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, I'll be speaking to the Liberal Democrat leader, Ed Davey, to get his live reaction. There he is on the King's state visit to the US. Well, let's get more on our top story, shall we? We can speak now to Sir Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, about the confirmation of the King's visit to the United States. Is this a good moment to build bridges, Sir Ed?
Well, good evening, Ali. I'm afraid we shouldn't be rewarding Donald Trump with this state visit. The truth is he's insulted our country, insulted our troops. He's undermined our economy with his tariffs and this illegal war, which is putting up people's petrol prices and energy bills and mortgage costs. And I don't frankly think it's fair to the King. He's so unpredictable, Donald Trump. He could criticise our country again, he could criticise the government and leave the King in a very embarrassing situation. So I think this is the wrong decision.
Is this the beauty of the opposition, that, you can say these things, but actually it's not you that's Prime Minister that has to navigate these tricky, diplomatic, important relationships? What would you do if you were Prime Minister? Would you genuinely not allow the state visit?
Well, frankly, I'd have handled the whole relationship with Donald Trump very differently, right from the get-go, when he was threatening tariffs on our economy, when he was undermining the support for Ukraine against Russia's illegal invasion. I was calling him out, and frankly, the only opposition leader to call him out, Kemi Badenoch for the Conservatives and Nigel Farage for Reform, were cheerleading for Donald Trump. They support his illegal war that's done such damage to our country. I've always argued we should stand up to Donald Trump, and if you look at how other countries have managed that.
Well, sorry to interrupt. What exactly do you mean when you say stand up? Spain has gone so far as to close their airspace to US military aircraft. Is that how far you'd go?
No, you take each issue by issue. But look what Mark Carney, the Liberal Prime Minister in Canada, has done. They have a huge border with the United States. They're more exposed to the US economy than we are in Europe. But he's been prepared to stand up to Trump and say publicly that other countries should work together. And that's what I've been saying, actually. I've been talking about building our relationship with Europe, with a new customs union to protect us from the... Well, I'm talking about in practice because Donald Trump has damaged our economy. Let's look at alternatives, like a customs union with our European friends. Let's work with Canada and other countries who share our values and are as appalled as we are by the behaviour of Donald Trump. So I think you can stand up to him. For myself, I refused to go to the state banquet that was given to Donald Trump because the way he was supporting what was happening in Gaza, not bringing a peace, and he was the only person who could do that. So it's right that we call out Donald Trump. We've been consistent in doing that. The government has very belatedly started criticising Donald Trump, but unfortunately, on this occasion, they made the wrong decision and advised that the King's state visit should go ahead.
Should US bombers be taking off from British air bases?
Well, originally it was talked about as a defensive measure to stop the bombs hitting, for example, our bases in Cyprus. And we went along with that, but we did say there's a real fine line between supporting defensive actions and offensive actions. And we've been calling the government to account to make sure they don't go over that line. We've been very worried that we could get dragged into this illegal war of Donald Trump's. I know the Conservatives supported it. Does standing up to Donald Trump therefore not mean, not having dinner with him, but you can say yes to him using our air bases? Well, as I said before in our conversation, I said you take each issue by issue. And in the middle of this illegal war, the damage it's doing to our economy, to all the pockets of your viewers, coming on the back of the way he insults our armed forces and our government, I really don't think we should be rewarding him. And I think many people I speak to say, look, this is an American president, sadly, who we can't trust. He's no longer a reliable ally. I've been a passionate advocate of the relationship between the United Kingdom and America for many years, even when I haven't agreed with the president in the White House. You need to find a way normally to get along with them. But I think Donald Trump is completely different. Completely different. I think he's the most corrupt president we've ever seen. I think the way he behaves to his closest allies is appalling. Look what he did over Greenland. And there's a long list of the way he's behaved badly. And I just don't think it's right that the Prime Minister is asking the King to do this state visit and putting the King, frankly, in a very difficult situation with the unpredictability of the way Donald Trump behaves and speaks. I think it could be quite embarrassing for our King. I hope it isn't, but there's a huge risk there.
Okay, so Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats, joining us there from Southwest London. Thanks so much for coming on the show this evening. Well, we can go live straight to Katie Balls, who is in Washington, the Washington correspondent for The Times. Thanks so much for joining us, Katie. What are people in Washington thinking about all of this? I mean, we're obviously watching on from the UK. I know you used to be a political editor here. What's the take from Washington?
So I think there is plenty of excitement. Of course, the main story of the day in Washington, D.C. is still Iran, the Iran war. But certainly, I think the state visit, which in a way has been the worst kept secret for several months now, because you've had lots of people talking about it, including the president. Now the palace officially confirming it. But I think it's seen as a celebration. And of course, when you think about what the president likes about the UK, the royal family is very high on that list. He also likes that his mother is from Scotland, and he likes his golf courses. His views on the UK prime ministers tend to come and go. They can be in a state of flux. And currently, clearly, we're in a point of tension when it comes to the UK government and the US government. But I think this visit is very much seen from the DC perspective as a celebration of the 250 and also an honour bestowed by the royal family, as opposed to something overly political.
In terms of the regular jibes towards our prime minister, I mean, do you think that it matters, or do you think it's just words?
Well, all these things matter to a degree. I think the question is how much does it start to impact the way the UK and the US work together, given they have so many shared things in terms of security, intelligence, in terms of potential trade opportunities. I think, Donald Trump is the type of president, maybe not even a type, he is a unique president when it comes to criticizing lots of world leaders in the past. And therefore, I think that... so I think that when you're thinking about, how much does it mean that he's taken a particular, moment to criticize Keir Starmer repeatedly over several weeks? It's not particularly helpful to the UK government, but he's also criticizing France, he's criticizing Spain. I think that there is a question as to what does this mean in the long term for pacts like NATO? Are you going to have a situation where the US feels less inclined to listen to Europe on Ukraine, feels less inclined when it comes to various things such as security agreements in the future to help? I think those are all things to worry about. But I think Keir Starmer is not the first UK Prime Minister to have to deal with, the harsh side of the president's tongue.
I know this is probably an impossible question, but, on the show, you're the closest we have to a window into Donald Trump's mind. What do you think he's going to do next?
On Iran?
Yes, more broadly.
I mean, I think he is purposely keeping his options open. And I think that as much as we can all try and search his soul or his mind on this, I always think back to an interview he gave to the New York Times just before his inauguration. So he'd already been elected, and he was talking about foreign policy. And he said, he was sick of all his previous presidents saying that if you strike X, we're going to do Y. And I do keep thinking about that when you have all these contradictory messages in the course of a day, which is he does want that element of surprise. I do think there is political pressure now, both in terms of the economy and even those who are close around him, that they don't want this to drag on for weeks and weeks, which means I think they'll want the exit ramp. The question is, can they have enough to really sell it and to take it?
I'm just going to stay there, Katie, but we've just got some breaking news into us. We understand that US Embassy is recommending that all people in the Saudi Arabian embassy shelter in place. It reminds us, of how live this situation is. That is breaking news. The US Embassy recommends that everyone in the Saudi Arabian embassy shelter in place. But Katie, just to go back to the link with the UK, is there anything you think the Prime Minister could do now here to try to smooth things over?
Well, I think Donald Trump has clearly taken issue with the UK response on Iran from the very beginning. There are signs long before Iran that there were tensions rising. The Chagos Islands deal, I think, was brought into, particular focus because of Iran. But we also already had what was announced at the state visit last year, which was this tech partnership. That has been on pause because the US has decided the UK isn't doing enough to deliver it, and also doesn't like the fact that the UK is moving closer to the EU. The White House also have concerns about the UK moving closer to China. So I think the tensions go beyond just the Iran war, and is why when you speak to figures about this visit, they're not expecting that many big policy announcements. Sometimes the governments can use it as an opportunity for this. But certainly if you wanted to please Donald Trump, it would be to show up and give him what he wants when he asks for assistance. It doesn't feel as though that's where Keir Starmer's mind is right now. And actually, he is, at least in the short term, experiencing some benefits of looking as though he, has a different opinion than Donald Trump, and he's willing to say things that the US president doesn't like.
OK, Katie Balls, thanks so much for joining us on the Politics Hub this evening. Well, the deal to fund police on the shores of northern France has been extended for another 2 months. You can see Alex Rogers is with me as both sides wrangle over a more permanent deal. Alex, you've been looking into this as well, basically an extension of what's there already, right?
So there was a deal signed in 2023 under Rishi Sunak, which was set to expire. And now the Home Office has extended that by another 2 months, paying £16.2 million for that. And under the deal, 700 officers will continue to patrol the French coastline. But what we think the government is trying to get a better deal, really, which is why these negotiations are continuing. So we think they want more enforcement officers on the coastline, and also they may want payments linked to targets and results. Now, the French may not like that, being told what to do by us from a sovereignty point of view. And there's also questions about, is this deal actually working? Because there's been 40,000 crossings last year, and I think 4,000 since the beginning of this year. The Home Office would argue that if this deal hadn't been in place, we'd have seen even more. But critics are saying it doesn't go far enough.
OK, Alex, thank you very much. Stay there. Let's bring our panel in on this, shall we? Michelle and Joe. Michelle, I mean, obviously you guys grappled with stopping the boats. This deal is being extended. I mean, a source told me that they want to drive a hard bargain, but that's difficult with the French, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, credit to the government. They are trying to introduce a kind of payment by results initiative. But let's take a step back and look at this deal and how it's worked in practice so far. It hasn't delivered. Only a third have actually been stopped. We've seen footage of French standing there and watching the situation and not actually intervening. They've not been going into shallow waters and intervening like it's happening in Belgium. And we've seen 70,000 plus migrants coming over in the 20 months that this government have been in power, when a big reason why my government was booted out at the end of the day was because we failed to stop the boats. Keir Starmer made a massive promise about being able to smash the gangs. That has simply not happened. And now we're paying the French to extend for another 2 months. But who knows what's going to happen? And it was ineffective before. This is just not good enough.
Joe, do you think this is something that the government are going to be judged on, immigration?
I think, unfortunately, they are, because we're not. I think there's a completely alternative discussion that we could be having every time I'm on a show like this and we talk about immigration and small boats, which is, small boats, refugees and migrants didn't crash the economy. Liz trusted that. They haven't created NHS waiting lists. They haven't put rents up, and they're not the reason that we've got low wages in the UK. Hang on. And we focus all the time, and we're really encouraged to focus on migrants and refugees. And there's much bigger issues that we could be talking about, the solutions to this country. And moreover, we've just spent a good portion of this show talking about Trump's, misguided war in Iran. We see wars all over the world creating refugees, destabilising countries and economies. People flee. All of these discussions about deterring small boats hasn't worked. So we need to be focusing on how we have safer routes, and we need to be focusing on what we do globally to stop destabilising regions and countries and creating the conditions which mean people flee.
I can see you're keen to come in, Michelle.
Yeah, I think the key point is that this isn't about politicians forcing this topic on people. It's about people forcing it on politicians because they actively care about this. If you go knocking on people's doors, the top issue that comes up time and time again is the fact that people are fed up with the situation and the fact that we can't control our own borders, and we have We have to remember that at the end of the day, we're a small island, we have limited resources, it has to be a fair system. And at the moment, quite frankly, we're seen as a soft touch, and that is acting like a magnet, attracting people to come here and take advantage of our system.
I honestly just think that's nonsense. If you look at, Kemi in particular, reform, we are constantly exposed in this country to the politics of finger-pointing, and the finger-pointing is always going on vulnerable people, migrants, refugees. We are never finger-pointing upwards. We are never finger-pointing at the billionaires, and I just think it would be nice to have that alternative discussion way more often than we do.
Well, the billionaires and the millionaires are the wealth creators that create the jobs, and the general
and don't pay their taxes and pay zero, have zero contract.
Well, the top 1% pay over 2/3 of income tax, but the vast majority of people, according to poll after poll, really passionately care about this topic
because
and want
constantly
change.
told all of the problems we have in this country would be resolved if we could stop that. And it's a nonsense, but that is a constant news item that we are fed in this country.
But I think you're talking the British public down because you're therefore saying that they can't think for themselves.
No, I'm not saying
that. And I think that they can and they care about this topic.
I'm saying the drip, drip, drip of a constant narrative works. That's exactly
We're going to
have
to leave it there. We know there's such strength of feeling around this, and it's good to debate these issues. Alex, final thought from you, because the government might struggle with all this getting through their plans because of strength of feeling in the Labour Party MPs.
Yeah, and I think the passionate discussion we're seeing here before the summer has even arrived, which is when we see a real uptick in those crossings, shows that this is just such a hot political topic for Labour MPs as well.
OK, thank you, all three of you. We will come back to our panel shortly. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, we'll show you Donald Trump's idea of a library.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8, we'll discuss the ban on XL bullies and whether the government needs to go further. This is as the owners of 2 dogs face justice over fatal attacks. Plus, I'll speak to 2 survivors of Mohammed Al-Fayed who are speaking out over the closure of the Harrods Compensation Scheme. And we'll discuss the King's diplomatic mission to Washington as the government seeks a reset with Donald Trump. All that and much more on the UK Tonight from 8.
I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Over the next 45 days, an estimate 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. We take you to the heart of the story in the largest democracy in the world.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
Thank you. Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my...
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
Those vivid colours of summer have faded now, but the trauma for everyone who witnessed what happened here hasn't gone away.
Devastation. We lost 3 of them.
Ruda Cabana's guilty pleas mean they won't have to relive what they saw in court, but everyone here tells you they'll carry it for the rest of their lives. You see people running red lights time after time after time. This is an offence that sometimes has the most awful of consequences.
When you speed through a pedestrian crossing, there is a risk that you could batter somebody to death. She filled our lives with light. She was innocent, she was happy.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
He had a beautiful death. He fell asleep in my arms. This is about a dying person's choice to die peacefully when they want to, on their terms.
Donald Trump has posted what appears to be an AI video showcasing his plans for a presidential library in Miami. It shows Well, as you can see, it shows a skyscraper with Donald Trump's name emblazoned in gold letters. Inside, there appear to be copies of rooms from the White House, including the Oval Office, and a statue of Trump raising his fist. The scale of the project is indicated by a life-size replica of Air Force One in the lobby, but from what we can tell, this is a library with absolutely no books. Right, let us bring our panel back in, shall we? Joe and Michelle. Michelle, it's kind of tradition in America to have a library if you're president. Is this what do you make of this video? Is this how we should commemorate?
Yeah, I think it's since Hoover that this has happened. I was going to say the same thing, that I've not spotted any books in this video. But golly, it is a spectacular building, a piece of wonderful architecture that I think people would want to go and see, but it's typical. Yeah, it's not really in good taste with everything that's happening, but it looks extraordinary.
Joe, what do you reckon?
Well, you know, as the representative of an education union, a library with no books looks like the worst library in the world, though, you know, maybe there's a lot of space for his colouring books. I think on a serious note, though, the video does sort of exemplify the problems with AI. You know, AI is a threat to our ability to learn, you know, on what is real and what isn't. You know, it can really affect our attention spans, and I think that video is kind of like playing into that joke, so...
Well, he has got quite into these AI videos, hasn't he? But I should say, a little earlier, I did speak to visitors in Parliament Square, where a variety of previous Prime Ministers reside, from Churchill to Palmerston. I'm sure you've seen the statues. And I asked them how we should commemorate politicians.
I don't think that we should commemorate them by statues at all. It's a waste of money. I think that we should maybe do a long receipts list of all the things that they've done, good or bad.
Politicians today, I don't think they deserve to be in a bin and not have a statue. That would be too much for them. I think taxpayers should deserve better.
What do you think about a giant gold statue of Donald Trump?
Well, I think that really should be up to the American people. And I think that should come, in a way, either to Congress or to the joint houses of Congress and the House of Representatives.
This Donald Trump statue, is that too much?
I think so.
I think so. I think he doesn't deserve something much.
Yeah, like gold and stuff.
OK, Joe and Michelle, I mean, how do you think we should commemorate politicians? I guess it depends on who. How would you like to be commemorated?
No, I think in terms of former Prime Ministers, I do think it is important that we remember them, we remember their contribution to society, and it's part of our historic fabric, and we learn from our history as well, don't we? So I do think it is important. Obviously, we need to be deploying and using money in a sensible fashion. So I'm not advocating that we build something akin to Trump's proposed library for every Prime Minister, because I don't think that would be a good use of taxpayers' money. But I do think it is important to remember those that have served. It is a great form of service.
Yeah, which is that very few statues are women. But Joe, what do you think? How should we be commemorating? You know, just simple plaque or these big gold statues?
I think if you do a great job and you really represent people and you leave a legacy, you are remembered because of that, yeah? I think of Clement Attlee, the man who helped rebuild this country post the Second World War and gave birth to the welfare state. I think of Nye Bevan, you know, the architect of the NHS. You know, I think of someone like Tony Benn, who was an ardent anti-war campaigner all of his life. I'm not interested in plaques and statues. I'm interested in institutions that live on, or concepts and ideas that live on, and that's how we remember people.
I mean, yeah, is that a fair point?
So I think you need both. Of course, you need the discussions and people to remember what they did. There's no point just having the statues. But I think it is part of being respectful and part of our heritage and our culture to be able to commemorate people that have served our nation, be that veterans, be that politicians.
But you think of someone like Nye Bevan, who literally helped create the NHS, you know, talked all the doctors into signing up to it because they didn't want to do it at the time. I bet if you asked him, he wouldn't want a plaque or a statue. He'd want proper investment in the NHS.
Yeah. OK, thank you both. That is all we have time for. Well, that is it. We will be back tomorrow at 7. Up next, the UK Tonight with Sarah J. Mee. Thanks for watching.